Hey folks, welcome to Head, Heart, and Hustle, the podcast for creatives. I'm Alan Plummer, your host. Thank you for listening. Anyone with a side hustle or creative outlet can feel isolated from their friends, their family, and others around them who just don't get their passion. That's why Head, Heart, and Hustle exists, to help you feel motivated, learn, and just get a nice pick-me-up of creative energy from other people like yourself. Every episode, I interview a creative individual who doesn't just pretend to be creative. They've rolled up their sleeves and are producing great things because they need to. They know that being creative is part of who they are. Sound familiar? Great, then you're in the right place. Today, I'm chatting with Ben Haley, an old friend of mine that I've known since high school. Ben lives out in Seattle with his wife and his kids, and he's done everything from photography to music and drumming. At the moment, he actually produces a show out in Seattle called Salon of Shame. We'll get more into that in a moment, but Ben has been creative in multiple outlets of his life. He's a lot of fun to chat with. It was like catching up with an old friend of mine, and I think you're going to like this one. Let's dive in. Holy shit, Ben. How are you?
I'm good, buddy. How you doing?
Good. So we were just saying, it's been like, do you really think it's been over a decade? Has it been that long?
I think so, because here's the thing. It is certainly possible.
Right.
Actually, let me think. Our last big adventure together was Graceland back in '94.
And Seinfeld was still on television then, I think.
Yeah, I mean, all manner of things were happening back then.
Right.
We were a little younger.
A little
bit. That's the thing. We probably seen each other maybe a little bit after that, but I think that's probably right there in the mid '90s. You know, it's probably been 20 years, honestly.
Holy crap. God, when did we get so old? I'm still 25 in my head, man.
Right, man. I don't even know. Like, I just turned 48.
Okay.
And by 42, I just lost any sense of what age meant or what I was supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
I have a couple of kids, 8-year-old and 4-year-old, Sagan and Kepler.
Okay.
Because we're nerds.
Because you're nerds. And I'm going to guess that Sagan is named for Carl.
Yep.
They got it.
Yeah. Kepler is named for Johannes Kepler. He's the dude who wrote the 3 planetary laws of motion.
Nice.
He was one of Carl Sagan's. Here it is. So, yeah. But, yeah, I mean, with having kids and a marriage and a house, living in the city that I've always wanted to live in, here in Seattle for 12 years, you know, age is whatever. I'm more likely to remember my kid's age than mine at this point.
Yeah. I'm lucky if I remember what I had for dinner last night. Really. But I still remember the trip to Graceland. I still do. I remember we stopped somewhere for gas in the middle of the night. Maybe it was Tennessee or somewhere around that way, going to see your family. And I remember getting out of the car and like giggling like a schoolgirl at the gas pump. And both of us were, and I looked at you at one point and I was like, what's going on? And you were like, I don't know. Everything's funny. And it just lost it. And I think it wasn't even like we were on anything. And purely it was like no dose. And I probably drank my body weight in Mountain Dew. There was nothing illegal involved in that.
Right. Right. It was just this weird sort of positive stress fatigue.
Yes.
And just like, what's going to happen next feeling. No, It was so good. Yeah. I'm so grateful that you put that together when we went on it. And remember, like, this is kind of heavy. Like, one of the things, like, the last minute we decided to do was go by and see my grandmother.
Yes.
And she was late stages of cancer, and she died a week later.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we got to see her and, videotape her, and suddenly that tape, like, everyone wanted the tape because, like, you recorded her last kind of moments here.
Yeah.
And I mean, what an unexpected thing. I mean, it's beautiful in its own way.
Yeah.
Even though it's sad. You just never know. And ever since then, I've tried to keep my mind open about traveling, either literally or figuratively. And I think it was Roger Zelazny once I said about writing. He said, "Trust your demon."
Yeah.
And what he meant by that is probably pretty obvious. It's like if you're writing and suddenly you have this harebrained idea about what could happen next, just try it.
Right.
Worst that's going to happen is you'll ball it up, but it might take you somewhere that you weren't even planning to get to, but you're so glad you made it.
Yeah.
And certainly in writing, I do that. I mean, I do it in relationships, and
Yeah.
Sometimes it works. It's everything. I mean, you can plan all your shit out, but I mean, is it going to survive the battlefield? Maybe.
Yeah, but probably not. All of us would get knocked down at least several times in our lives. So,
yeah.
Before we go down to reminisce too far, we've kind of already started down that path. You've tapped on this already. One of the things I like to do, everybody's probably like, "What the hell have I just jumped into?" One of the things I like to do is to ask people to introduce themselves to start out. So I think you've tapped a little bit into who you are and the family and where you live and stuff. But give folks kind of a little sense of who you are and what you do, and kind of, I know why I tapped you for this podcast, but feel free to kind of chat about what you do and what your creative outlets are.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm going to go with current events. So I live in Seattle. I have a wonderful partner and 2 kids. We live in a neighborhood called Leschi. I am currently a stay-at-home dad. I take care of our boys. Probably my passion outside the house is a show I produce called Salon of Shame.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what's known as a cringe reading event. This is where people get up. They have found their old diaries, their old journals, old notes that maybe they sent to, someone maybe they never got around to sending. They find stuff. They're like, "Oh my God, this is from like 20 years ago. I hope no one ever sees this." Right. And we want you to read that in front of a paying crowd. And it's beautiful, though. Like, we've been doing it for 12 years. It was started by a really dear friend of mine, Ariel Metastallings, and she's a genius at this kind of thing, about kind of tapping into the zeitgeist to like finding like, hey, I think people would like this, and just pouring a lot of energy to it. And then suddenly we had it. Like the first couple of shows way back were at a tiny little theater. No one knew about us. Mostly our friends. And then we just kept poking along. The local paper found out about us, and suddenly we were selling out every show.
That's awesome.
And we kept moving to larger venues. But we have sold out every show in under 2 minutes for the last probably 8-9 years.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And we're talking about our base is these days is Theater off Jackson, which we love. It's just a perfect space for us. Bunch of couches, little bar in the back,
mm-hmm.
little stage for people to read. It's seats like 150 people,
right?
And every time it fills up. It's been a while. I used to get hate mail from people who couldn't get into the show. That's when you know you've made it. When you've literally made someone so angry, they're like, "Well, this guy's going to get a piece of my mind."
Right.
And they would try to convince me, you need to stop. You need to fix this.
Yeah.
You need to like find a way that different people can get in. I think the same people get in over and over. And I'm like, "Hey, man, I'm sorry. We're not distributing insulin. This is extremely like not a priority." I'm flattered, right. Sort of, but now you've kind of pissed me off. So yeah. But
so you line up all the acts for it? So what's your role in all that? Because it's not just you, right?
No. I have a staff. We have one person, Jeannie Endel. She is the MC. We have Phyllis. She manages another really critical part of the show. So we've always had ASL interpretation, American Sign Language, mm-hmm. during the show. And I'm always careful to talk about this bit because I want to maintain the utmost respect.
Yep.
A lot of people really love that aspect of the show, the interpretation.
Right.
And we're really happy that our deaf friends and our hard of hearing friends come to the show.
Mm-hmm.
This is This is their language. This is their way of interpreting the world. This is the way they speak. It's not any different than us.
Right.
It's their world. But God damn, it's entertaining because, there's someone, okay, if you just like equate it with me talking,
Yeah.
if I talk in a monotone voice describing something, you're like, okay, well, this is technically the information, but Jesus, I just yawned myself to death.
Punch it up a little bit. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. A good orator can make anything amazing, and you can laugh and be entertained just as much as the way they read it. And this is what the ASL interpreters do. They're extremely smart, creative people who are really good at interpretation, who can just bang, bang, bang. They have it. They hear it. They sign it.
Right.
But they add their own personality to the signing, and it's perfectly clear to those who understand American Sign Language to know what they're saying. But it's the way they're signing that's amazing for, not just our deaf friends, but for everyone.
Right.
Anyone who comes to the show figures out very quickly, don't look at the reader, look at the interpreter. Because there's two beautiful things happening in the show. You hear the person reading and getting embarrassed, and you see the interpreter sharing in that, sharing the embarrassment, sharing in the moments. And, it's a lot of our readings are pretty frank. They can be pretty lewd. They can be pretty like, this is the first time I had sex, or, this is how I was able to, confront the fact that I have a crooked penis. I mean, these are real examples.
Right.
This is before I came out, and here's a journal entry where it's painfully obvious that I'm in the closet, but I didn't know it yet.
Yeah.
These kind of things. And they're really like tender, raw shit. But they're not being laughed at. That's the beautiful thing. Everyone there knows they were there in some way or the other. And the laughter is mutual. We're laughing together in this. There's moments of just like, this is fucking hysterical that you took yourself so seriously.
Right.
Or this is hysterical that you were so naive. I read almost every time. I have a box full of journals. I took things very seriously. Hell, Alan, this is crazy. So I'm reading things that I wrote while you and I worked together in the 90s. Like, that's how old I am, that I can read that stuff, and it's far enough ago.
Right.
But good God, man, it's another one of those times where I value friends like yourself because you knew me pretty well, but liked me anyway.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate it.
Feelings mutual, right? No, right? I get it. I know. And you look at stuff from that period and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe, like, it's almost like a third person, right? Like, there's a lot of that shit that when you start to drag it up, it doesn't even resonate. Or if it does, it's very, like, detached from who you are now, Yeah.
This is like, and that aspect of is definitely very present at these readings. You can see the person processing this on stage, that like, oh my God, like I've come so far, or perhaps not, like some things maybe I haven't gotten quite so far.
Right.
But that recognition from the audience, it's like, a lot of it's light, but plenty of it is like people are kind of opening up, and they're maybe exercising some demons even.
Yeah.
Because it can be some pretty vital stuff. It can be stuff that it's like, Jesus, boy, that happened to me too. I can't believe that someone else that happened to. We have about 10 readers a show. For most of our history, our show is every other month. I've started to expand that. There's a second performance house that we've been going to that's 3 times as big over at Seattle Center.
Okay.
Cornish Playhouse. And they've been really good to us. And that's helped solve the problem of people getting to see the show who can't make it in. As far as my role in it, so I take submissions from folks who want to read. They log in through a form, and they tell me a little bit what they want to read. There's rules on our website, salonofshame.com, that people need to look at. And it's really basic things like, hey, let's keep this at about 6 minutes.
Right.
Don't perform, just read.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be your writing. You don't want to shame anybody else unless you just sort of carry them along for the ride while you were journaling them. Just stuff like that.
Yep.
It's a 21 and older show because, people are talking about people are talking about, their first blowjob and this kind of thing. Yeah, it's just, we got that and people drink.
Right.
A lot. Like there's a certain like bar total you need to make for the theater to be good and not have to pay them back.
Right.
And we meet it every time. We always have.
I thought you were going to tell me, yeah, we usually make it in the first 30 minutes.
Right. There are times I think they've run out of liquor, and they've learned a lesson. It's always
awesome.
fully stocked. Yeah. So reader submissions. I'm the DJ. I try to play songs after each reading that maybe connect with what the person was reading.
Right.
But that's just on the fly because I don't vet their readings. They just describe the reading, and I don't know what they're going to read either.
Yeah.
Right. And it's that kind of sea of your pants sort of thing is one of the reasons that makes this show really exciting for people. Because you just don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what someone's going to say.
Right.
And every show feels like the best show. What else do I do? We put together we have some shirts now.
Nice.
We have season passes for the thing just because people are so tired of getting sad that they can't get tickets. They just want to, they're willing to like buy their way into the show for the whole year.
People actually will pay, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but I mean like you guys have that much demand that somebody's going to fork out a substantial amount to guarantee themselves a spot every week or every month. Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I thought it was silly. Like I just sort of came up with the idea and I thought, okay, we sell our tickets through brown paper tickets. And I said, I'll just add these like season passes that are basically the same cost as if you paid for each show. And they were like on like that. And people were demanding more. So I sold a few more. And people still want them. They're a valuable enough commodity that I've been able to raise money for local causes and charities just by the chance that you might win it at a raffle.
Right.
I've been able to raise a fair amount of money for a couple of things I'm involved with. And it's just, I'm as shocked as anyone, even after all this time, that people really, really love this.
Right.
So yeah, we have Jeannie's the MC. Phyllis handles our deaf relations and schedules the interpreters and makes sure that they all have front row seats. Our friend Rhoda, she is the house manager, so she runs the door and initial sales if people want to buy shirts.
Right.
My wife Joriel runs the website.
Nice.
Yeah, we get some volunteers to help set up chairs and put them away.
Right.
Frank, he's involved with Theater Up Jackson. He does the sound and lights and whatnot. Anyway, but yeah, it's a lot of different things. I also maintain our kind of social media presence.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's hard to get readers, so I kind of have to recruit periodically, encourage people who had really good readings to come again and read something new.
Right.
And like I say, I genuinely love it. It would never have occurred to me, I feel like, being humble here, this sort of thing would never have occurred to me on my own.
Right.
Arrow Metastallings, who I mentioned earlier, who founded the thing, she actually was inspired by a similar show she'd seen in New York. And she said, Seattle should have this. And there are other places who have this sort of thing. There's Cringe was in New York. They may be gone now, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Mortified is like a whole institution.
Okay.
They actually tour around with these kind of readings. They think they made a movie and this sort of thing.
Sure.
I'm very flattered by this. We actually inspired 3 other shows.
Nice.
There's one in Olympia, Diary Disclosure. There's one in Denver, My Teenaged Angst. And this is fun. My mom reads it that one because she lives in Denver. Right? It's very strange.
God, I love your family. And
Right? They're nuts. They're nuts. I love it. So she and it was one night we did something fun where like my mom didn't know it was going to happen, so she did a reading at the uh, my teenage angst show there, and then um, the producer of that show, Megan Nice, she did a we did a video like conferenced in, and I did a reading right after her. It's like a virtual reading, and it was about it included stuff about my mom,
right.
and everyone just thought that was just the most adorable thing.
I'm sure. Yeah.
You know, like,
Yeah.
and here's my son, you know, and he's reading, and he's the producer's other show,
It
and
feels very like Carrie Fisher-esque. What was the the one woman show that Carrie Fisher did, right? I totally
yeah,
get that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
you've done, so we've talked about a number of things that you've done, right? So we've already talked about, you mentioned your writing. We've talked a lot about the show. You mentioned
Yeah.
DJing.
Yeah.
We talked about the video camera a little bit on the trip to Graceland. I want to talk about the photography stuff when you were younger. And then we got to talk music. We got to talk about the band, right? So it's for folks that have listened to a lot of the episodes, it's not intentional, but a lot of my folks that I've interviewed are people that have grown up in Richmond or passed through there in some way, shape, or form. Again, it's just kind of worked out that way. So people have heard me talk about King's Dominion and talk about kind of folks that have worked there, whether it's Cece or Brian or other folks. We can get to that in a couple minutes, but let's talk a little bit about some of the other creative stuff that you did when you were younger that kind of got you to where you are now.
Sure. So photography is a great one in terms of really getting the juices stirring, building some confidence about the ability to express myself in a way that I could feel like I could share with people. Because I've been writing poetry and stuff and journaling for a while, and I actually would in high school would kind of pass around and share it with friends, and they'd make little notes in the like little liner notes to talk about like, oh, that was nice, but that still felt really private. With photography, so in 12th grade, I took a photography class with Miss Cuneo.
Yep, me too.
Right, that's right.
I love
Good
that
old
class.
Dave.
Being in the dark room and
Yes.
developing our own, the black and white and the sepia tones and stuff. God, that was
Yes.
awesome. Yeah.
It was so good. It was so good.
Carol Cuneo. I think
Carol Cuneo.
last I had heard, she was doing real estate down in Richmond.
Yes, which is an interesting career change, but
Yes.
yeah, but she was so encouraging of me that I finagled my way into having 3 classes of photography. I don't know if I ever mentioned this. So
No.
yeah, I needed my senior year. I had sort of a space where there could be another class, and I convinced her to let me have like be in 2 classes of hers. And then I had a end of day study hall, and I convinced her to let me in there too. So my senior year of high school, half my day was spent in the darkroom, and I couldn't have been happier.
It's awesome.
Yeah, but the point we got to, her and I, was I'd still be in there after 7th period, and she was ready to go home, and she'd be like, "Hey, can you just lock up when you leave?" When you're a 17-year-old, a teacher saying something like that to you, it was mind blowing. I suddenly was being treated like an adult, kind of. And
this
that
was not
just,
even a plain classroom, right? I mean, this was like truly dark room and equipment and photography paper and like access to the whole thing.
right. This was kind of a big deal that she was doing this.
Right.
But she let me. And I was just taking photographs like crazy. It was all black and white stuff. And like you remember, there was just that smell, the dark room, that the excitement of watching the image slowly appear in the chemical bath, and experimenting, just trying stuff. You know, this is long before the days of Photoshop. So if you want to do anything clever, you've got to just kind of figure it out.
Dodge and burn.
Dodge and burn, man.
Yep.
And your clothes would just smell like those chemicals.
Yep.
But I I kept it going, and I'm still a photographer. As time went by, I'd photograph weddings, I do headshots for people, but mostly it's just for my own self, my own sake. Uh, I've gotten a little lazy these days. I focus a lot on photographing my kids,
Hmm.
but I do some creative stuff. Most of it's going on Instagram these days, and then occasionally I'll share it to Facebook as well
I've seen
because
your
it's just
stuff.
so easy.
Yeah, and I've seen your stuff on Instagram, and I wouldn't even say that it's lazy. One of the things I love about you when you're behind the camera, whether it's a video camera or just regular photography, I think it's really easy to kind of worry about what's in the frame and let that be the story. One of the things I liked about your stuff is that you've always made the camera a part of what's going on. So, like on the
Mm,
Instagram stuff, when you're filming your kids, you're in the mix with them, and when you're moving around with the phone and putting in effects and and doing stuff that's just a lot of fun. Do you know what I mean? And it feels
yeah,
very kinetic versus kind of the typical, okay, I'm going to stand here, hold my hand really still so I get a steady shot and just capture what's going on around me. You are not, that is not fucking who you are. But I like that. You know what I mean? Um,
yeah. Thank you for saying that, man. Yeah, it's. I mean, hearing you say it, I'm like, well, yeah, I do that. I just hadn't really thought about it. I'm so used. It's like, you drive for enough decades. You're not even driving. It's just happening. It's like you're walking or breathing. And with
right.
photography, well, I I don't put myself in any like grand category about it. In terms of capturing things though, it just happens.
Right.
And deconstructing it that way, maybe I should give myself a little bit of a pat on the back because I do very much want the shot to be unique. I
Yeah.
sometimes I get lucky and it's the first take. Other times I'll spend half an hour getting a picture, and my kids are get nuts about it because they're like, Jesus, let's just play. And I'm like, hold on, there's something amazing happening here.
Right.
And most of the time, when I finally get done and show them, they're like, oh, cool. This happened in clown band a lot. Like the band would get so furious at me for always stopping to take pictures. But the moment I got them developed, they're like, "Oh, give me, let me see, let me see, let me see," and they'd be
Right.
so excited. And it's this trade off. But um, yeah, Instagram has been really fun to get that immediate feedback,
Yeah.
which that's new for just all of us.
And that's the whole
Uh,
social media thing. That's what I love about it is that immediate feedback. And we didn't grow up with that. You kind of
no,
release stuff and you had no clue what was going on.
yeah, and you had to go to some big whatever
Yeah.
to say, well, I hope I get this published and people will actually see it. Uh, and there was this huge chasm between you and getting yourself out there. Now
Yeah.
everybody can do it.
Right.
Everybody's a photographer.
Right. Right.
That frustrates some people, but I'm delighted.
I love it. I mean, and I think it's a great equalizer, right? I think mass media is dying. I think there's always going to be a need somewhat for mass media. But to your point, right? I mean, musicians probably have had it easier. They could always record albums and sell them at concerts or out of the trunk of their car or whatever, whether or not it was cassettes or CDs or records or whatever. But to your
Right.
point now, today, you don't really need galleries. You put your stuff online, you put it on Society 6 or Redbubble. If you're a
Yeah.
writer, you can publish your own book and get it on Amazon. I mean, shit,
Yeah.
I'm doing this podcast. You know what I mean? There's
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
much, and the definition of success changes too because you don't have this one big, massive audience. So, like your
Yeah.
your example of Salon of Shame is great because it's kind of the idea of you can find your niche, you can find your tribe, and be extremely successful in that. And it doesn't require 1 million people or 100,000 people. Even.
Right. Right. And for success to come, however we might define success, it doesn't require 1 million people. It only requires, in my case, almost just only like a few thousand people.
Right.
Um, this is a very old bit of terminology, but I took to it right away a long time about the long tail. You know, it's you don't have to have 1 million fans. You just need to have 100 really, really dedicated fans. Um, and you get that kind of core group, like, you know, a cult film will kind of stay in the mix because there's this like little subgroup of people who just love this fucking film.
Yep.
And that always feels more rewarding than just like I'm watching the Oscars or I'm watching, some big movie like Avatar or something where, well, everyone's seen it. Everyone likes it. Of course they do. And maybe it's good, but the back and forth isn't there. Like with Salon, you know, I try to make sure everyone feels like, oh, we're so glad we're here. This is like you say, it's my tribe. Um, with photography, there's a similar thing with, like you say, you had that immediate exchange. And it's encouraged me to do things I wouldn't have done otherwise. I don't know if you know this. I have an other Instagram account
Mm-mm.
uh, that's all really dark shit.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the handle on it is Ben_O_thing,
Okay.
and it's run by my alter ego, Mr. Crow, and
Okay.
it's all these really, I guess you could say, like really fucked up memes. Like I'll just basically when I have like really dark, depressing thoughts,
Yeah.
I'll come up with some pithy phrase for it, and I'll put it over top of an image I've taken a photo of, and that's it. It doesn't get any deeper than that.
Right.
It probably comes across as really pretentious and nihilistic, but I enjoy it. It's a nice outlet.
Nice.
Yeah, and boy, get really deep into it. Um, Occasionally I'll do, like with Instagram, you can do like a live video thing,
Right.
and one of I think the nice differences between it and say the Facebook Live is it does not get recorded. It happens and it's gone,
Right.
which if you think of it, it's kind of rare. That's like more the sort of Snapchat model where it's like, this is why I can share, nude selfies is because they go away.
Right.
It's this moment in time. So I kind of dig that. So what I'll do is occasionally I will, it'll be late at night, everyone's asleep.
Yeah.
I'll get really stoned. I'll put on my Mr. Crow outfit and I'll just do a live cast of me just babbling nonsense, and people will log in and be like, "What's this? What's going on?" And I'll just try to yank them into it, and it's ridiculous. And Joya rolls her eyes every time I do it, but it's just really fun. It's like there's something. It's almost like, you get out in the median of a highway.
Right.
And there's like everyone's going like 70 miles per hour, and you decide to go out there naked and just see what happens.
Right.
Right. And people see you maybe they slow down, maybe they don't, but you're like, holy shit, I can't believe I'm doing this. Then you go home. And there's something just thrilling about it. There's something thrilling about this. Just like, I don't care what anyone thinks about this. I'm not hurting anybody. If they don't want to watch it, that's fine.
That's an interesting analogy. Have you been on a highway naked?
No comment. No, I have. I have probably been nude at times in places I shouldn't have been, but
Okay.
the highway wasn't.
Highway exclusively. I specifically asked about a highway. So take that as a no. All right. I'm not asking you to dig the hole any deeper. I just said highway. I love it. So we talked a couple of things I want to come back to. So you did mention kind of this idea of creative success. That's one of my favorite questions to ask people. You certainly talked about your idea of creative success evolving. What does that look like for you now? And how does it differ from, when we were in our 20s and we were both back in Richmond?
Sure. Back in our 20s, and not just because we were young, but as the times, and we've talked about the difference now about what it means to yourself out there. There was it felt like the only real measure of success, capital S, is if you got published, or your photograph got in a show, or your band signed a contract. And now it's way more ambiguous. And maybe in some ways it feels diluted. For me, it's a relief. Like after many years of not having those things I mentioned before,
Right.
but then slowly realizing, oh, there's this web, like literally of fans waiting for a new thing to look at.
Right.
I felt like, well, hey, this doesn't really have to be like all this work into one thing. This doesn't have to be crafted with this very broad audience in mind.
Right.
The thing I might come up with, only one other person may like it, or maybe a dozen or whatever. But um, I confess there is some vanity to it.
Mm-hmm.
It does, it's some nice, soft porn for my ego to have someone tell me something I did was fantastic, right?
Sure. Sure.
But honestly, just getting it out there is for me the joy of it. The creative success is for one, sometimes it's just that I finish it and get
Yeah.
it out.
Yeah.
Like,
Just to say you
thank God.
fucking done it.
Right.
My
I
first
mean,
book, nothing has happened to this day with the first book that I wrote, when I was back in Richmond. But it's
yeah,
just the fact that I fucking did it. Totally.
right, right. Um, there's that old saying, everyone has at least one book in them. Not everybody has two.
Right.
Uh, but if you never even write the first one, you'll never fucking know.
Yeah.
And it's a big deal to do something like that.
Right.
I know people who are working on their first book from 20 years ago, and you talk yourself out of it. And one of the reasons I think you do is you do what, uh, if without meaning to offend those people stuck, because I'm certainly stuck on certain projects that are undone. You get obsessed with the idea, like, okay, you're imagining a book in a bookstore, and you're imagining your name on it, and you're imagining what the worst critics will say about it, and that's God, that I think that fucks you up.
Mm-hmm.
I think um, the thing you have to ask yourself is, okay, if I got this done and I published it anonymously and I never made a dime, would it feel successful? And if yes, go ahead and do it. If no, maybe think twice, at least about your
Right.
intentions. You know, you can write a book to make money. In fact, it'll probably be easier than trying to write a good book.
Yeah.
Uh, the two aren't mutually exclusive, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Oh,
Like
I've done
there's,
both. Absolutely. It is easier to write a book to make money. I've been a hired gun. Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. And I think as long as you recognize why you're writing, why you're creating something, then you're going to be okay. And then I've certainly told people, like, look, just don't get stuck being that terrible critic of yourself and never put anything out there because it's not quite right.
Right.
If it helps, imagine that no one knows it's you, but also be willing to let go of the fact that if it's good, no one will know it's you.
Mm-hmm.
Focus on the joy of creating and finishing. Um, Try to let go of the vanity of it. Because if you actually do get published and actually a success, then ultimately someone's going to hunt you down. And then, yeah, you did it. But, this isn't a thing where I'm trying to like encourage people to be all like Buddhist and shit about it or like, let go. It's really just that vanity and that self deprecation is in your way.
Mm-hmm.
You might think it serves you well, but it doesn't. It slows you down. Just make shit. Just do it. Um, my uh, my buddy Noah, he his first big success was Skull a Day. I don't know if you're familiar with him,
Mm-mm.
but he was like he's a really big fan of skulls, and he would find things that looked like a skull, whether it was like odd shaped rock or like the paint on the side of a house,
Right.
and every day he'd put up another picture like this. And he's a really fantastic artist. He lives in Richmond. Um, I'm a terrible person. I've forgotten his last name. Um, but
It'll come
he's
back.
he's yeah, yeah. You check it out. I mean, he'd actually be a great person to talk to.
Okay.
Uh, he has expanded since then, and he does all these really amazing art installations. He wrote a book that ostensibly is about uh, getting yourself to focus on a project. One of my favorite techniques he came up with, and I've tried to do this, I'm not quite there yet, is the 365 plan. Basically, pick something and do it every day, no matter what. Even if it's drawing a fucking horse, even if it's taking a picture of something, Just do it every day for a year. Just commit to that.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of it, see where you are. Um, and he's certainly done similar things. He's encouraged other people to do this, and it's really amazing. And maybe your first time making something really small, but the sort of personal feedback you get from that when you look back over time and be like, this was good dedication.
Yeah.
I actually commit myself. And me, I can't even stay on a diet. So this is part of my concern is that I have all these unfinished projects and I want to move past that. And I think that's one of the ways you get there is you just commit. Like, it doesn't matter if it sucks or not. Just keep doing it.
There's immense power in just not giving a fuck. I mean, that's kind of where I get to, man.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do.
And if money's not on the line, all the better.
Yeah, it is better in terms of just thinking about pure creativity, in terms of like just, making something out of nothing or making order out of chaos. Yeah, don't worry that anybody likes it. Hell, maybe try to make something that people would deliberately hate. I don't know, like whatever takes you there.
Why not? Yeah.
Try to piss the world off. It's it just lets it out. Maybe you never get published. Maybe you never get out there, but you feel better. All we're doing is just, riding a spinning rock for X amount of time and then we're dead. You gotta enjoy yourself. You gotta get something out there.
Well, and I also think, I don't know if you've got any thought to this. I think it's really interesting that with kind of the growth of the internet and technology and everything, it's always been like this, but I think it's worse now. Is this this tendency to just consume constantly? And I don't necessarily mean like buying things and shopping, but we're always taking things in, right? They talk about information overload. And so, you work in front of a computer all day, or you're looking at your phone screen, or you're checking Facebook, or you're on Instagram or YouTube. And guess what? Everybody comes home and watches TV, and then they get ready for bed, and you're looking at your tablet in the evening before you go to sleep. I mean, there's no sense of balance, right? I mean, you got to have balance in your diet. You got to have balance spiritually. Well, shit, you got to have balance creatively. And I think that if all you do is consume other people's thoughts and other people's emotions and other people's stories, and you don't take the time and energy to put something back out, you're missing out. You don't have that sense of balance that you should have.
No, I totally agree. It's, and it's funny, all the things you just described are kind of the other side of the joy we described of this new network.
Yeah.
We can share things. I mean, there is a dark side to it, right? I mean, there always is. The promise, the early promise of the internet still kind of breaks my heart. You think about in the early 90s when they talked about how it would be, it's like, oh, it'll be the end of nations. Or,
right.
It'll be the end of capitalism, it'll be the end of money. We're just all going to be online. All the information is going to be there, and the truth, capital T, will always be known.
Right.
And it didn't work out that way.
Right.
It's, people found ways to make money. People found ways to like mislead people for power. Just all the same things that ever happened. But a lot of good came, right?
Yep.
And I think the biggest one, well, and this brings bad stuff too, is you can find other awful people just like yourself.
Oh, totally.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But plenty of good comes of it. Like, so I'm really into like, zebra art. You're going to find your people where you couldn't before because you lived in a tiny town and there was no one like you.
Right.
Suddenly you could find your tribes. It's as if all there had been this way where we just kind of separated and spread out. Suddenly there was a chance that the tribes could get back together, that people could return home in this virtual way. Mm-hmm. And that is a good thing.
Right.
But like you say,
if you're a racist, hate-mongering dude, guess what? You've connected with other racist hate-mongers online. We're seeing that. Absolutely.
And the worst thing is the echo chambers, the feedback loop of people all mad with the same things.
Yep.
And they feed each other. There's a really good video about this. There's a guy called CP Gray, and he makes a lot of like really thought-provoking little videos. And one of them is talking about how ideas are like this virus, and they spread, and everyone has a reaction to them. They either like it or they don't. And the more it gets spread, and the more they find other people who like it, the angrier they get about the people who don't like it. And it the discussion withers because your lizard brain takes over and you're emotional about it. Um, I don't think uh, anyone's ever going to agree on abortion, for instance,
Right.
because it's too emotional, and that's not meant to necessarily criticize either side. Um, I mean, really, I think the fact that men are involved in discussion at all is the biggest problem.
Mm-hmm.
But it's something where the two sides are simply too diametrically opposed.
Mm-hmm.
On one hand, the rights of a human being, of a woman, to have control of her own body. Well, shit, yeah, that sounds great.
Right.
But the other side is this thing where like, well, you're killing babies and it's murder. I'm like, well, I'm not for killing babies,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not for taking away reproductive rights. So what am I? Well, I
Mm-hmm.
have to choose a side. There is nothing to be done that will be heard.
Mm-hmm.
The people who scream the loudest will always be heard, but the moderate bit will be gone.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is the kind of thing that also can stifle creativity, is this just binary thinking. And I'm as guilty of it as anyone.
Mm-hmm.
I get in my down times and I go onto Facebook, and it's full of people who more or less agree with me because I got so tired of jerks in my feed.
Mm-hmm.
So I just blocked them all because I'm like, you know what, fuck it. I'm not trying to like change the world, and I'm sick of trying to educate people on things that I think they think that are stupid.
Right.
Um, I I go to the same sites over and over again. I get done with it, and I feel like, God damn it, you did the equivalent of eating the whole bag of Cheetos again. And it sure seemed good going through it, and you get to the bottom of the bag, I'm like, oh, I fucking hate myself. Those hours are gone. I
Mm-hmm.
could have spent them doing anything, right? I could have spent them creating something that I could then share and somebody else would waste their time
Totally.
with.
Totally.
You know,
Yeah.
I and it's yeah, I totally agree with you, Alan. This is something where anytime you find yourself just basically junk fooding
Yeah.
on the web,
Yep.
if you can close the lid of the computer, God damn it, do it.
Yeah.
Get away from the computer, get a pad of paper, anything, and just yeah, 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 unhook.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you is there anything that you've done creatively that we talked a little bit about success? Anything you've done creatively that you felt like was a big learning lesson for you? Not necessarily a mistake per se, but something where you're like, "Oh, yeah, you know what? I won't do that again," or "I should have thought about X before I went and did Y."
Yeah, yeah. I probably have a couple of things like that. I think uh, I was pretty naive about the way I could make money with photography.
Hmm.
Uh, there were a couple of points along the way. Like I briefly had a studio down in Shako Bottom. There was a whole bunch of artists in there, and it was fun. Like I had a bunch of prints made of a lot of photographs I'd taken in Yellowstone when I lived there,
Right.
and it was fun to have. But I sold so little,
Mm-hmm.
and same with later on advertising myself. Oh, I'll do this, and I'll put the wedding and this sort of thing. And but I couldn't bear to advertise myself
Mm-hmm.
because I wasn't really in it for the money. I mean, it seemed like it would just follow and I'd just get to do my thing or whatever.
Right.
But it's like we talked about earlier, I'm not saying that you can only monetize or only enjoy it, but you know, the most work I got was from friends who I couldn't bear to charge them.
Right. And being an artist isn't just enough by itself. You have to think of it as a business if you do that.
Yeah.
I had the same issue when I was writing for a living, right? I mean, I did well in New York when I moved to New York. But then when Sarah and I ended up back in Richmond in 2001, And the economy started to go south. It was brutal. And I
Yeah.
had a pretty good, decent amount of work, but it was really struggling, right? Because nobody teaches you. Like, we learned how to do the creative stuff. We didn't learn how to manage ourselves, or how to actually collect payment. I mean, I would try to get jobs, and I would get jobs, but I had no control over how long it took me to get paid. And that was
Yeah.
like a career for me for 8 or 9 years. Like, I kept it going, but I'm shocked I don't have an ulcer from laying in bed all those nights worrying about paying the rent, you know?
Right. No, it's hard. It's really hard. Like there's really good reasons why there are no poetry-based economies, right? Like
Right.
it's just, this it doesn't work. I mean, it's nice. It's super great to have like the arts and this sort of thing, but yeah, you will break your own heart trying to make money with it unless
Yep.
you become like that 0.01% of artists who do take off.
Yeah.
Um, and Seattle especially, I mean, we're just lousy with photographers here. There's no point. You have to once again do that long tail thing where it's like you find some very specific way to do photographs and it can maybe work because people go like, oh, go to him, go to her, she does A, B, and C. Oh, I've never thought of that. um, but just trying to be a generic photographer or anything, yeah, you'll be miserable.
Right. Right.
um, so like I say, there's pros and cons to how things are now.
Yeah.
um, I couldn't find my a specific enough niche to do it with the time I had. And of course, I was been working full-time jobs forever here.
Hmm.
I couldn't ever really dedicate my time to it. Um, that said, here I am now. Joriel is working for a consulting firm downtown after freelance writing for over a decade. So she's back at the office. I'm at home, and for the first time, in the spare time I do have from taking care of our kids and the house and everything,
Right.
I am feeling my creative juices going again.
So let's
Um,
let's talk about that for a minute. So you talk about having the
uh,
free time and everything. One of the things I always like to ask people too is, how do you balance that? So it's, we say, well, you get free time, you work on stuff. Do you have a routine or any kind of lessons learned of how you make sure that you have time for all that stuff?
yeah, I get the kids in bed, I get stoned, and I stay up to 2 in the morning. All right, that's
Some things never change.
yeah. I mean, I know it sounds kind of flip, but dang, that's how it happens so often. Like
Yeah.
I only have like one, maybe 2 mornings to myself in every given week now, and the rest, I'm taking care of my boys, and I love them. I love spending time with them, but it doesn't leave me a whole lot of time to be able to sit and just think
Yeah.
and create uninterrupted.
Right.
I'll try to involve them in things like, try and encourage their stuff. Like Sagan is becoming like a really excellent artist. He's learning guitar. Um,
Nice.
and it's yeah, like I want to encourage him. I don't want to just be like, just do your work and do this thing. Like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm encouraging him like I would have wanted to be encouraged growing up.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I will. I put a lot of energy into Salon of Shame because you know that's something where it's been steaming along enough that I feel like I can get as much out of it as I put into it. Um, I've finally started working on a second project I've been thinking about for a long time, but now I finally have time to do it. Basically, I'm putting together a cinema of shame
Oh,
where
wow.
it's going to be submissions from people of like pretentious student films from college, like silly home videos, just like shit like this. And I've already had some fantastic submissions.
Now, can I plant an idea?
Yeah,
So if you're already getting all these readings and you've now got people submitting stories, why not take it online and scale it that way? Like, I was hearing you talking about these readings, and I'm like, oh my god, that could be a podcast in and of itself. You could record these folks. Each 6 minute reading could be its own little short episode.
hey,
You know what I mean?
yeah, good minds think alike, man. We're working on a podcast right now. Yeah,
Nice. And then I'm thinking about, if you get all these videos and you guys button it up, you've got a whole YouTube channel there. Even with intro and commentary and stuff, you could totally do that.
we could absolutely could. yeah, we're gonna see how well the podcast does. Jeannie is doing all the heavy lifting on that. Um,
Okay.
and yeah, she has a big journalistic and media background. She works at KUOW here in Seattle, which is the NPR affiliate, and
Right.
her and Phyllis both. And yeah, so she's putting together like these just some of the best readings, doing some introductions to them, and it's yeah, I'm super excited. But I agree with you. I occasionally people will videotape the shows and they'll end up online, but this is something else I'd love to make the time to start kind of curating that and putting it together.
Right.
I kind of had that at one point, but YouTube kept fucking me over with changing the format, and it eventually just sort of destroyed what I had as the channel. So, um, but yeah, I agree with you. I think that would be a great way to do it. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, like somebody, one of our favorite readers came by the other day, Laura Rose, and she had a film that she and her friends had made like 17 years ago, where she played this superhero that goes around and schools cops who pick on minors for like just little silly offenses. I mean, and it's amazing. Like it's so silly. Like it's so like badly acted, but it's just beautiful. Like this is the kind of thing, like this sort of extremely underground kind of cinema that's just no one has seen and get it out there. Uh,
Right.
but yeah, so that's sort of that project's in alpha right now. Um,
Yeah.
and I've got from way back when I was doing a lot of transfer work for people from Super 8 film and VHS whatnot. I still have that stuff, and so that's been key in making this work.
Right.
Because a lot of this stuff is on like old media. Um, but yeah, yeah, there's a lot of different little projects that I'm trying to dedicate my energy more to. Um, I find that you know it's satisfying every time I dedicate any time to it, but it's still hard because it's hard to remind myself that this is going to be more rewarding than just watching Rick and Morty for the eighth time. That this is
Right.
going to be more rewarding than just staying in front of the fridge and eating.
Mhm.
And you know, these these are hard. You know, you get the older you get, the more you're encouraged to kind of just settle in. Like once you've finally taken care of the chaos of the day, I just want to veg out. I just want to zone out. And sometimes you should,
Yeah.
but
It's a constant for me. It's a constant battle against just being tired.
yeah,
Dude, my son is 6, and I don't know about you, but I just like physically and mentally, I'm used to being tired at this point. It doesn't change.
yeah, yeah. It's true. I mean, you're just always tired. Uh, and being a house husband now, like it's funny. Like compared to working in an office, um, the work is simpler, but it's harder, and you're never off the clock. It's
Right.
just you're doing this forever, and that kind of cooked my noodle at first because, uh, trying to separate out the day from work and leisure was hard because it just sort of all dangled together. Weekends stopped meaning much of anything. Uh, and this is the kind of thing that can sabotage your desire to like make things and do things because you if you don't have that allocated time that you're always going to get, it can really fuck you over. You can just always feel sort of jet lagged and never feel like, oh well, you just feel like, oh, I deserve to just fuck around, um,
Mm-hmm.
because I have to think so hard and work so hard during the day. But like I say, every time I dig into something, it's always just amazing. I always feel great about it. Um,
Yeah.
and so, like, if I was going to encourage anyone, I would just say, look, uh, kind of like the 365 thing. Just if you can just make a half hour every single day, even if they stay up late to do it, do it. Any kind of routine like that you can get, do it, and try really hard not to resent that routine. This is something I think is really hard for people, me included. is
Yeah.
to resent presenting yourself with yet another bit of work. Um, but once again, you come back to it like, okay, but if I'm just doing it for pleasure, if I don't think about the potential, any potential financial award or
Right.
personal recognition, if you put those out of your way, because they really are roadblocks, um, you're gonna be more successful. You're gonna be happier.
Yeah, and for me, it only feels like work the first couple minutes, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like you don't want to get into it. You don't want to start because it's kind of shifting gears. And there's like for me, there's that first 10 or 15 minutes, and then once you're through that, you're in the zone. And for me, I just lose track of time.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, 10:30. All right, I should get ready for bed. 11 o'clock. Okay, I really got to fucking go to bed. 11:30. Oh, fuck it. I might as well stay up till midnight. 12. Okay, one more thing and shut the computer off.
Yeah.
Like, that's how my brain works,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And how much more joy is gotten from that you drag out before you go to sleep doing something
Yeah.
creative than like just being on Facebook or something where you just, like I say, with the stuff in food in your face, you just hate yourself at the end. It's like, Jesus,
Yeah.
nothing was gained. I basically just pressed a little lever for food pellets for 2 hours, and I wasn't even hungry. Like, I
Yeah.
just wanted like time to myself and be doing nothing. Before I forget, my friend Noah Scalin,
Okay.
is the guy I'm talking about, and I'd be more than happy to introduce you to him. I think you would love talking to him. I think he'd
Yeah, let's do it.
be perfect for your show. Uh,
Awesome.
yeah. The
So
Yeah. Go ahead.
go ahead. No, I was just saying I was going to shift gears. We drove by Clown Band really quick, and you dropped that bomb, and we had
Oh.
we've got people who are like, "What the hell is that?" We heard him talk about cartoon characters a couple episodes. What is this guy talking about? So I felt like at some point we need to circle
We
back
do.
to the wonderful world of King's Dominion and talk about that. So we haven't talked about your musical background either.
Yeah. So I was in symphonic band, starting in sixth grade, all the way through marching band. Then, drums.
Drummer, yeah.
So, I hung out with musicians. Um, it's just, it's, it always, it was all,
Well, in all fairness, we say joke about Richmond, right? We weren't in the city of Richmond. We were out in the suburbs.
yeah,
A little bit. I won't say it was rural. It's probably suburbs now, but in the '80s it was a little more rural. We had farmland out that way.
yeah,
And if you were creative, right? I think it's fair to say that if you had any kind of artistic inclination, you either were a kid that hung out kind of and drew in art class.
yeah,
You were either a musician and you ended up kind of in band, or you were, a singer and an actor and ended up as like a choir geek. You were one of the band geeks, and I was a choir and theater geek, right?
yeah. It's true. It's true. And they all kind of mix together. Um, yeah, yeah. So like by senior year, I was drum captain, which, I was delighted. I was playing the tri-toms, and then my senior year, the quad toms. And we had these cadences, did all this stuff. And when Clown Band came along, it was something they were bringing back from the 70s. And George Sadler had been in that Clown Band from way back. So,
So explain what you mean by clown band. Let's give
yeah,
people a visual
sure.
of what that is and what that was like.
So right away, it's very important to understand we did not wear makeup. That's very important to me.
That's true. I didn't even think about that, but god damn, that's so true.
Right. Because
Yeah.
anyone who hasn't seen it is like, oh, geez, that sounds creepy. No, there was never any makeup. I kind of never quite liked the reference clown. And what's interesting is they actually it wasn't called Clown Band originally. It was the Kings of
Oh, I
Comedy.
didn't know that.
The Kings of Comedy.
Okay.
But sadly, comedy was spelled with a K. I don't know why people do that.
Oh.
The K of K, and it's just so it was ridiculous. But they sort of approached us like, hey, so Kings of Comedy, and we were kind of like, well, we're kind of more the clown band, so we went with that. It stuck. But the clowny part was, we wore these silly outfits, the big pants with patches and silly hats,
You
and
wore
we
shorts with tuxedo jackets.
pretty
right?
much, yeah,
And high top
and high
chucks.
top chucks, and we do little silly dances, and we played. But the music always we tried to make the music come first, even though there was choreography. But the clown band, like, so Kings of Me and Came to Sadler, it's like, hey, you did the clown long ago. How about you put something together? And they basically took all the section leaders from the marching band.
Okay.
So, and just put them together, and we all knew each other. And, we auditioned for it, came with some songs to play, and they'd have a choreographer and musician that would come down from corporate and teach us the show. And you'd have about 5 songs, 2 or 3 of them we'd choreograph, and the others, we'd come up with choreography for them. And we'd just go in for the Eiffel Tower, there in Kingston Dominion, their little miniature Eiffel Tower, and just we'd do a little show. And some of the shows you'd pull somebody in to dance with you. It'd be a comedy routine, looping around, and God, it was so fun. I mean, it was like the most amazing job I'd ever had in my life. By that point, I mean, it was 18. We did this I was in the band for like 6 summers. I was making more money than I'd ever made.
And then you got sucked into management like I did, and we just delayed our adulthood even more.
Yeah. Like, we were done by college at this point. It's like, well, what am I going to do now? Well, I can just work here all the time, I guess. And
yeah.
That was its own silly thing, but it was fun. We had fun together. It's funny too how, like, no one would like say it aloud, but off season we didn't do a whole lot, but got paid. And
you got paid. I felt like I justified it by all the appearances, because you helped out with quite a few of those. There was always character appearances.
Yeah.
Probably not enough to fill 40 hours a week, but there was certainly at least 1 or 2 a week on average.
Yeah. Those long lunches at Pizza Hut.
Yes. Yes. It'd be like 3 hours hanging out, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or like we'd borrow a van, like, oh, we're gonna go to Safari and like work on something, and we just go over there and dick around. Yeah. Or wander around Lost Mountain,
Right. Go back in the rides, hide back in places you're not supposed to be. Anything.
Totally.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Totally.
It was fun. Yeah, with Clown Band, we the only bad thing about Clown Band was the heat.
Oh, don't even talk to me about the heat.
Jesus.
I don't even want to hear that.
Oh, that's true.
With the costumes that we had, now I didn't have the drum.
Okay.
You had to run around with the bass drum. That was no fucking joke.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No, you're right. Yeah. You were all wearing like fuzzy torture devices.
We were. It was when it was like 90 degrees outside, we would probably be like 120 in there. Now, the one good thing, and this is not to like blow smoke up anybody's ass, but it was good that you didn't have the sunlight. That actually made a difference. You were baking inside those things, but at least you didn't have the sun beating down on
That's a good point. Yeah. You had some shade.
Yeah.
You got to walk around with pretty girls.
And you like all of us, you kind of got treated like celebrities.
Yeah.
So talk about kind of the ego thing. That was kind of crazy too.
Oh,
that kind of messes with your head a little bit.
No, it's true. It happens in theater. It happens in performance stuff because, you get this. Your ego gets swollen because you have just strangers clapping for you every day. It wasn't a good thing, but I think you agree with this. There was this sense with entertainment overall that this was the job to have of all different departments in the park, in terms of like being treated well and being paid right.
Yeah.
And my buddy Andy, he worked at the Alpine Cafe right below the entertainment lounge, and our worlds could not have been any different.
And for people that are listening, like the entertainment lounge, so Ben and the band and myself and those of us who dressed up as kind of the cartoon characters shared lounges, and even later on as it evolved, we were up on a second floor on the main street of this park as you come in.
Yeah.
Think of like Main Street at Disney World, and it's kind of a much smaller version of that.
Right.
And so we would have these air-conditioned lounges upstairs with like refrigerators and televisions, and we would come in with, it's the 90s, you'd come in with CD players and boom boxes and magazines, And so we would perform, right? Maybe 20, 25 minutes, at tops 30. And then you'd come in and have an hour break paid
Yeah,
before you went back out because we needed to rest between performances.
sure. And you needed it, but there was no other job like that. You know, everything else, you
Right.
work in rides, you work in games, you're just working until it's time to stop working. Um, you know, you're having to deal with patrons way more directly, which
Right.
miserable. Um, you know, I don't know with the characters though in that regard, like you guys getting punched and kicked around by patrons, that was just Jesus,
Yeah.
right? Like that wouldn't happen to us. It wasn't as likely because you didn't have that sense of removal did with the
Right.
characters. So yeah, I mean, I don't think it was undeserved necessarily that we got treated nicer, but you're right. It was a very unique kind of job to have as a teenager for sure. Uh,
It was not a realistic introduction to the working
oh,
world for
oh,
a bunch of people in their teens and early 20s, right? And most of us were like theater majors of creatives of some sort. And you grew up in the area and you were like, all right, I'm going to get a job at the park. And we didn't know, I don't think we knew how good we had it.
no, no, any more than we really knew how good we had it in college until we got out in the world. It was like, oh,
Oh, hell yeah.
right.
Yes.
And you're
Yes.
right. It was an
Yeah.
extension of that. Creatively, I did really love being in the band. Luke and I, and then later on, uh, you know, we people would cycle through, but Luke and I were together the longest, and he and I had been, you know, in drumline together, and we'd come up with all these different cadences. We just create them. The band would learn the music, and while they were learning it, we'd just do a solid beat to keep them going, and then we'd come up with the quote unquote actual music. And so it's funny describing this now. It sounds like we were some kind of musical geniuses. I don't think we were. I think we just really loved drumming, and
Right.
we, you know, and we knew it could only be but so complicated because one of the main reasons we were there is to keep the tempo going right. I mean, I think the drums
Right.
sound good, but you know what I mean. It's like no one else really had that job, and we liked being that backbone. Um, and you know, in some ways too, I think back at almost like sort of a uh, like being in a band of brothers kind of thing, like you know, going in the army or going in some other thing where you're forced together and you work really hard physically and have to
Mm-hmm.
deal with each other. I mean, we had fights all the time uh,
Mm-hmm.
because you know we're just young bucks full of spit and vinegar, and other times we're just
Right.
having fun. But you know, and we, I think a lot of the clickiness and drama of high school got drug out with the 12 of us because
Mm.
we just, you know, I think of other friends who went off to college. I didn't see them again until after college and just had very different friendships with them. You know, we just had this sort of constant high school friendship that I think, and that's not casting fault on anybody. It's just being
Right.
forced together like that. Uh, I think it had this sort of arrested development um, that maybe we never quite shook.
Yeah.
Um,
Right. Right.
the
Yeah.
But yeah, it was beautiful. It was a wonderful, wonderful job.
So, last question for
Yeah,
you. This purely is kind of how I like to close up with everything. So, what advice do you have for people when it comes to their creativity? What would you say to somebody who is either starting to pursue their creative passions or has been for a while, or what nuggets of wisdom can you share?
sure. So we kind of touched on this earlier. Right away, go and decide what your intent is. Like, are you are you trying to make a career? Are you trying to make money, or do you have things inside yourself that are just ready to burst out that you have to share? Do you love the process of creation and completion, or is this a means to an end? And no judgment on either path. You really need to know that going in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think both are possible, but I really think you should probably pick one, and the other will come if it comes. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
like we talked about discipline, just try to do it every day. Um, the example I like to think about a lot for myself, you see those really amazing ballet dancers, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
and you look at them and they're like, God damn, how do they do this? They do this because it's their whole lives. The really great dancers, ballet dancers, they don't do anything else. I mean, maybe they have relationships,
Mm-hmm.
they go to restaurants and they poop like everybody else, but you know what I mean? Like they they've decided my whole thing is ballet dancer. And when you look at that and you think, well, shit, couldn't I do that with anything? And yes, you could, right? Like, meanwhile, on the other end of it, if all you want to do is make money, then you're going to make money. It's just that's all you're ever going to be doing. If you're willing
Right.
to do that, it'll do. Just like if you want to be anything, the more time you can set aside to just be like, this is who I am, the stronger it's going to be. You know, you are probably not going to create really great things if you just kind of half-ass it. And
Mm-hmm.
and I sympathize. It's hard. You have kids, you have a quote unquote real job, but you've got to carve it out and you've got to be willing to fail. Uh, you've
Yeah.
got to remember that mistakes are the only thing you ever learn from. No one learns anything from success. You're like, attaboy, and then it's done. Like there's, people who, for instance, are testing new rockets. Every time a rocket launches, of course they're happy when it doesn't blow up, but they're aware of the fact that they didn't learn anything. When it crashes, they're like, oh, cool. Okay, now we get to find where that flaw was and we'll fix it. And we're going to keep doing that until we get it right. I mean, and that's the same with writing, with photography, and everything. You know, success feels amazing, but it will burn you, right? It will burn you
Right.
because a point will come where you do fail. The longer it takes you to fail, the harder it will be, and the more likely it'll be that you will just give up. Uh,
Mm.
don't give up unless you found something that you learn from the mistake and say, oh, well, what I really need to do is this. Um, if you have a half-finished project that sat around for any more than a year, uh, pick it up right then or throw it away. You know, don't leave reminders of you half-assing things around you unless you're truly just willing to pick it up right there, um, and share it. You know, share it with people. It doesn't have to be people you trust necessarily. Just be willing to hear whatever they say and encourage them to
Mm-hmm.
say it sucks if they think it sucks. Um, you know, don't. Some people really feel the need to keep it private, and I respect that. But I say you have 100 different ways you can just get it out there. Do it. Um, get yourself out there. Stick your neck out. If you really want to do this, don't. You shouldn't be afraid of the judgment because you're doing this for you.
Mm-hmm.
Just like you should dress for yourself. Just like you should eat for yourself. Like anything, do it for you. Um, I have a dozen things that I thought of doing and never did anything with, and no one will ever hear about them. Uh, I I think that you owe it to yourself to get out in the weather, to expose yourself. Um, and I think the more you expose yourself, the more likely you'll be able to know whether this is something you really want to do. If you're excited about it, you won't fear the criticism. If you're really engaged by it, um, you won't care about being tired the next day.
And if you wait for somebody to tell you that it's okay to go ahead and do it, you're never going to get that.
Yeah, don't go to school for it. I know that's such a like old
Yeah.
hippie thing to say, but seriously, don't go to school for any of this shit. I mean, you go to school to learn a trade, to learn
Right.
and that's important. That's an important thing. You like, well, I want to build things. Well, shit, yeah, go learn to build things, right? I don't want to live in a house
Right.
that you just sort of came up with. But
Right.
if you're just trying to make a film, don't, yeah, go watch the great films, and then just go film something. But yeah, don't waste your time in a class.
All right, man. Well, this has been awesome. Thank
Oh,
you.
thank you, man.
I
This is so,
love ending on this note.
yeah, it's so fun talking to you.
All right, man. Take
You
care.
too, man. Bye bye.
All right. Thank you, Ben, for doing the interview and the podcast. It was great catching up. Folks, I hope you enjoyed it as well. Now, if you like the episode, shoot me an email and let me know. In fact, to show my appreciation, I'll send you a few stickers and buttons as my way of saying thanks. Just remember to include your mailing address in your email to me. You can reach me at headheartandhustle@gmail.com or through our website. You can also get email updates from us, which are fairly inconsistent depending on how busy my life gets. Visit headheartandhustle.com/newsletter to sign up. Remember that you can also find us on the web at headheartandhustle.com, as well as on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Google+. The logo for the podcast was created by my good friend Meg Shearer. If you like it, you can check out her other work on Society6. Just look for Meg's stuff. The music you hear each episode was written and performed by my friends Starch to Sugar. You can check them out at starchtosugar.com and on Facebook. Lastly, if you're interested in being interviewed for a future episode, shoot me an email at headheartandhustle@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Now go create something.